Welcome back to Roll for Adventure. Today we're looking at Mythender. We're lucky enough to be joined by Ryan Macklin, the designer of Mythender, all the way from Seattle. Welcome to the show, Ryan.
Hello, thanks for having me here.
So, what inspired you to create Mythender?
I started working on it back in 2007 when I was really frustrated trying to make another game happen that I put out at Gen Con. A game that I've since thrown away, but in being frustrated with it, my good friend and would-be later my cohort, Lenny Balsera of Fate fame, said, Macklin, you're getting way too tripped on this game. Just make a stupid game about killing dragons or something. And I started writing in my notebook this idea of a game about killing gods, and I wrote this die mechanic down. And from there, I just sort of started adding ideas to it. But it really came from being frustrated about making this high concept game about trying to travel through time and forget your memories and all sorts of weirdness. And he's like, make something simple. Turns out I didn't make something simple at all, but that's sort of how it started. And eventually it turned into a thing where a lot of people were excited. I had run at a lot of conventions, and eventually I did a thing where a friend of mine had a friend with a lot of cancer bills, around like $9,000 in debt because of various bills, even though she had medical insurance, which here in the States is a really fun and chaotic and complicated topic. And I decided that I would put up Mythender as a thing that I would do, where if she got enough money, we were raising money for, that I would put the game out for free. And if I didn't get that much money, I would destroy every copy I had, all of my notes and everything. So we got like the $4,000 that I said I wanted to get in like 3 hours. So like it became a free thing. So, and it's still free now.
An amazing community response, that's for sure.
Yeah, it was just before or like during like the vague days of Kickstarter and stuff like that. So people were definitely hungry to like fund for something that was going to like a good cause.
So we have to ask, why so many dice in this game?
Yeah, so I think my personal kit has 6 times 36, so around 200 dice of the 200 d6s of varying colors. And the reason for that is eventually the math spiraled out. Originally, I was going to use all of my Don't Rest Your Head dice, which I had around three times, about almost 100 dice for that game for 4 players and a GM. And I was going to use those dice for something else because I had so many dice for kind of just that game. And eventually the math spiraled out so that 4 players plus a GM for Mythender is around 200 dice. And the reason that I use all those dice is that during the game, you actually physically accumulate dice when you're doing amazing acts in battle, and you lose those dice when you're hit. So it hacks like the lizard brain part of you that that like sees the accumulation of stuff you have and sort of turns being hit into a more visceral experience. And watching me being hit and thus my dice as the myth master going away also is a more visceral experience. So it's there to kind of take the story that you're telling and turning it into this really intense, emotional on a different level sort of game.
So Ryan, what were your main design goals?
My main design goal, that is a tough question, I guess, because I spent 5 years making this game on and off. I spent about 6 months making the game. My friend Rob Donahue of Evil Hat broke my game in one session, and I spent 3 months being afraid of it and then coming back to it. And then I took a lot of time off of it to work on the Dresden Files role-playing game. But so on and off. And so like each phase, I guess, was a different design goal. Like originally it was, hey, can I make a game in a year that has this quirky idea? The answer is no, by the way, turns out. And then eventually it was like, hey, can I learn how to not be afraid of Rob's really harsh criticism? It turns out yes is the answer to that. And then eventually it became, can I make a game that actually successfully makes role-playing games feel visceral on like on a tactile rather than tactical level. And I think I did pretty well with that, but and eventually the design goal was to finish the game that people have been excited to, be playing at conventions for 5 years, which isn't really a design goal so much as I need to get it done.
So how would you sum up Mythender for someone who's new to role-playing?
Oh, Mythender's a horrible game for somebody new to role playing. I would not actually. I mean, because there's so much baggage with how it works that I wouldn't. But the pitch that I give to people who like at conventions or whatnot that are familiar with role playing, might be familiar with indie games, is I'll just ask, hey, you want to stab Thor in the face? Simple, direct question. It follows my one of the people that I respect, Robin Laws, who among other things, did like Feng Shui and Gumshoe, has a thing where your pitch should be 25 words or fewer, just to get people interested. And so I told him that, and he's like counting. He's like, okay, your pitch. He sort of smiles like, that pitch is successful. You can continue, Ryan. And so I give that. That is my pitch. And then if they are interested, I talk a little bit more about how it is a game where you go up against gods, but you risk corruption yourself. And because I can say it in person, and I can't actually write this in the book, it's like, do you want to play a Jedi who has to fall to the dark side in order to win? Like that's that's a good cultural touchstone that I use a lot. But yeah, I definitely would not talk about this game to somebody new to role playing. Not at all.
Are there any aspects of the game you think could work better?
Like now, as in like after I've designed it?
Yeah, in hindsight.
Like mechanically, no, but there are a lot of things. There are a few things that I would explain a little better in the text, because back then I didn't want to reveal some of the psychological components to it. I was afraid that, like for instance, the visceral element of having those dice and what that means in play, and how that kind of just tricks your brain into taking the story into a more personal space, and a more sort of really excited space, and a more space of like personal revenge at times, because people just get like, I watch people get like angry, not like in a bad way, but they get angry when I hit them, because it's not just them marking a thing on their sheet, but I'm like, I will sometimes reach over and just like grab the dice from them, and sort of mock and whatnot at the same time. But those psychological tricks, I think I would put more at the forefront. Like, hey, this is a game that does this. That's why it needs so many dice. But back then, I didn't say that because I was too afraid that by hanging a lantern on those particular elements, that it would end up dispelling that. It turns out that's not true. It just took me a lot of watching other people play after it was published to learn that. And there are a couple of things, like the fact that the game starts with a battle instead of starting with some more personal interaction is there so that you're hyped up. So when you get the personal interaction, you're still riding a high, and so you might actually treat people horribly, which is part of the intent, is to make you decide whether or not you want to. And if you started the other direction, you're more likely to always treat people humanely, which kind of defeats the purpose of asking that question in Mythender.
So if you could go back and change anything about Mythender, would you?
I probably would add 4 or 5 page, a few pages in just for that. But otherwise, no, I stand by the game. I spent way too long making the game for it to. Also, there's a certain point where you guys got to be done and move on to the next thing too. That's a big deal.
So Mythenders are so powerful. They can do almost anything. How difficult was it to balance that?
This is one of those games where the myth of game balance doesn't exist. There's no sense where you're so powerful that the game breaks. It's just the question of, okay, cool, you did this thing. Here's its cost. You still want to do it. And its cost is always progressing closer toward becoming a god that your friends are going to kill. The only, I guess, balance point is when two Mythenders decide that they've reached an impasse and one is just going to kill the other. And I tweaked a little bit of the math there just to make it so that, like, if one Mythender was closer to becoming a god than the other one, they weren't any better at killing their friend. because at first they were like, oh, I'm much more closer to being Odin, so I'm going to get a couple more dice to kill you, and it turned out that wasn't as fun as, all right, well, I just pissed you off, so let's just have at it. But that's the only point of balance. Everything else is like the little feats that are in there that are called gifts. There's some to make sure that none feel like they're totally obvious to take every single time. But that was just sort of a matter of play testing and watching which ones people were excited about and which ones people were there. But nothing about the power so much.
We've found this game works best as a one-shot, but we've been discussing the idea of a mini campaign. Do you think this could work as a campaign?
Its setting is paper thin. There's although the thing that's surprising is that after Mythender was published, I keep actually adding to the setting for different scales of games. But the game was always played as a one-shot at conventions, and on like 2 or 3 times we played a follow-up game. So it's the sort of game that maybe is serial. It's episodic. Let's play a game, and cool, some of our characters survived, and we'll play maybe and try this again in 2 months with those characters. And the one character that became a myth, let's kill that character. I talk just a little bit about that, but for the most part, it's a good one-shot game, maybe a 2-shot game.
So you've made Mythender open for people to tweak and hack new playstyles. Is there any ones that particularly stand out to you?
It's such a weird game that even though I made it open, a lot of people haven't done anything with it. So there's nothing aside from my own experiences that have done it. The closest is that people come up with really cool gods to kill. I've been chatting on and on with Quinn Murphy about, and I'm going to horribly mispronounce the name, the Yorba, some of the African deities, and talking about what it means to have a game like Mythender in that setting. And it's not just a matter of killing their gods. We sort of talked about like, so what do these characters actually look like in this world? Or what do they look like in a modern day setting where the gods are like the gods of capitalism and other sort of more getting to like the other side of Nobilis. Like for people familiar with Nobilis, the thing I say is you're playing the excrucians, ending concepts of reality.
So what's your most epic moment to come out of a Mythender game?
My most epic story is, it's not going to be what people think as epic, but it was the game that made me feel like I never needed to run a Mythender game again. And that was in 2010, played at a festival convention called Go Play Northwest, where I had 4 people, and they had just come out of this huge battle, the intro battle, where they ended up devastating the town as just sort of happenstance. And one of them's looking around, is like, I want to have like a personal scene with someone to connect with them. And I describe this woman who's crying because her mom's dead, and I describe this well that she's at, and he just comes up and he just says, "I'm sorry, we're here." We roll, because that's the one time where Mythenders may or may not fail, is whether or not they actually connect to somebody or accidentally through their presence destroy their soul. You roll, ended up succeeding there, and was just like this really super tender moment. And right after that, another guy says, "Well, I'm going to terrorize mortals for power." So there's a bunch of children, right? And I just sort of laugh like, well, that's definitely the follow-up scene, I guess. But it was that scene of tenderness that is so rare to have in Mythender. I was like, I don't need to run my game anymore. I'm done. I guess I'll still publish it or something, but I feel like I've accomplished what I wanted as a designer by having that moment.
Then the most touching moment, basically.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, there's so many like epic moments. Like people always one up each other. Like it's hard to say there's a most epic moment, because as soon as I play a game again, somebody will do that. I guess the space opera Mythender, where they all were in a battle cruiser and it was a battle of the bands where they were going to end Heimdall, god of rock, where half of the attacks were I'm playing music better and the other half where I'm actually killing Heimdall. That was pretty epic. Like I've enjoyed that story because of its ridiculousness. So I guess that one would be probably the more closer answer to your question of actual epic. But it's just fun to say Heimdall, god of rock, as played by Idris Elba.
Where do you see Mythender going in the future?
Mythender has gone into being more about its setting than its system, which surprised me because I thought that its setting was paper thin and its system was interesting. And as time goes on, people have asked me, "Hey, like I've got a Mythender setting in Storium that is about playing mortals in this world, trying to get by. There's a Mythender setting in Brian Engard's Becoming, which is about playing a single Mythender, getting revenge on a god and trying to not become a god in the process." And I keep wanting to do things like I played with a Dungeon World hack for it, where you were characters adventuring in Mythic Norden, and you could take on corruption just like Mythenders and gods could. So it's like the setting just keeps appealing to me. It's that harsh isolation, corruption, and I just love like the Norse adventure stories.
And finally, what are you working on at the moment?
I'm always working on something weird. This most recent one is I put out a game called Katanas and Trenchcoats, Episode 1, Welcome to Darkest Vancouver, which is me and 27 other people doing a loving homage to Highlander and 90s role-playing and White Wolf and stuff. And I keep making supplements for that are utterly ridiculous. So that, and just otherwise, now that gaming's not my day job anymore, trying to play more games. That is a really awesome thing to do, because I didn't get to do that enough in the most like last couple years.
Catching up on conventions and so forth.
Like, hey, we are four friends. We only see each other at conventions. Why don't you come to my house and I will grill food and we'll play a game? It turns out that if you add "and I will grill food," people are much more likely to travel to wherever you are, because then they're actually being fed something other than pizza.